Hi and welcome back, everyone. We are here still live at Awwwards in Amsterdam, and I have Amy here with me, product designer at WeTransfer, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? When did you get into the design industry? What is your background?
Sure. I studied visual communication in college and I graduated about 6 years ago now. So I've had lots of different jobs since I graduated as different types of designer. The first design job that I got when I left college was as the lead graphic designer for the National Leprechaun Museum in Dublin, which was pretty funny. Pretty mental, lots of miniature things and lots of folklore and designing for experiences kind of. And then I spent 3 years working for the Web Summit. I don't know if you've heard of the Web Summit. It's like a technology conference, which was pretty intense because it's a conference for like 50,000 people. And I was involved in kind of the visual design aspects of the name tags and banners and wristbands and the documentation that you would get and like the app and all that kind of stuff. But producing the collateral, but also the identity system behind it as well. And then 2 years ago, I started working as a product designer for WeTransfer, but now I'm actually a product manager. But I still think that I'm designing stuff. I am.
Awesome. So what would you say? WeTransfer is obviously sharing file platform. What would you say, where did we come from and where are we now? So I remember the old discs at the time.
Yeah.
Then next was CD.
Yeah.
USB.
Floppy disk was probably in there somewhere.
Okay, somewhere. I forgot that. Okay. Anything else that I'm missing? That's probably it.
Yeah.
So where are we at now? I don't have a USB port anymore, so that's where we arrived.
Well, that is a huge design flaw with the new Apple products, but that's a separate conversation to have.
Okay, not in this chat. Okay.
So what was the question again? Where are we now?
Where are we now in terms of sharing files and transferring files? What would you say is... I mean, we have all these cloud platforms and stuff. Where does WeTransfer fit into that, and who was first and who developed it further?
Well, that's a good question because that's kind of what I've been working on for the last year at WeTransfer, which has been exploring exactly that topic. So, like, with this whole connected environment and software as a service being the main landscape for anybody to get anything done anymore, everything's interconnected and connected to the cloud, and integrations are massive within other products to keep you in their flow. So for the last year, we've kind of spent some time researching that landscape. So how do people transfer files or ideas now, given the change in landscape? And we've spent the last kind of 6 to 8 months. I'm a product manager for the public API at WeTransfer, which I didn't even know what API stood for when I started this project.
Okay.
But it's basically enabling people to build WeTransfer opportunities within any product that they use for doing anything. So whether it's creating documents or spreadsheets or, creating a piece of music with Ableton, we now provide the technology to integrate sharing opportunities from within your products. So even though we only released the MVP of the API in May, what we're doing now is trying to understand how, like you said, how people share ideas or share files now, based on the technology that we've made available to them. And so people are doing pretty interesting stuff. So like, for example, I spoke about this in my talk where a front-end developer on my team, his neighbor has a cat called Bobbis.
We love cats, right? We can always talk about cats.
Yeah.
So, there are some questions in the channel. I'll ask them soon, but let's talk about cats first. Yeah, what?
So he's got a cat called Bobbis who calls around to his house.
Okay.
And Archites, who's the name of the developer that I was talking about just there, he built a face recognition device to identify the cat when he calls around, because Archites doesn't have a cat flap. So whenever Bobbis is outside, he gets a notification with a picture of Babis, the cat, inside a transfer, and also that notifies him that the cat is outside.
Really?
So now he's got this transfer full of Babis pictures, and he gets to know when he's outside to let him in. So that's an interesting use case for transferring.
How many cat pictures does he have by now?
Oh God, I don't know. I should ask him. I'll let you know.
That's an interesting thing to ask. That's great. Okay, we have some questions here. Paul is asking, what is product design? Well, the question would be, what is the product, right? Design is around the product.
Wait, what's the question? What?
Paul is asking, what is
product design?
Yeah.
Oh my God, what an existential question. I'm suffering an identity crisis at the moment. What is product design?
So maybe we should talk about the product. The product is WeTransfer in that specific scenario. So
So I suppose I focus primarily on the API aspect to WeTransfer. So the product is a public API, which is making certain components of WeTransfer's code, let's say, available for people to then code into their own experience. So I suppose that's the product. But then what I design, or what I have an identity crisis about every day, is the fact that the work that I do isn't necessarily a visual output, but I design the product in a holistic sense. So figuring out who uses it or why they would use it to then influence the decisions that we would make to develop certain features, but then be able to market it and be able to convince the CEO that it's worthwhile pursuing it, and all of these kind of aspects.
Sure. We have another question. Ashok is asking, when you joined WeTransfer, what was the biggest challenge for you in terms of UX?
I think, when I joined WeTransfer first, so originally I actually wanted to work for a design agency, a product design agency in Amsterdam called Present Plus. And they were a really cool studio that did product design in the sense of like the identity, but also involved in the actual product design process itself. And when I was putting my portfolio together to apply for a job with Present Plus, I read a TechCrunch article or something saying that Present Plus had been acquired by WeTransfer, and I was like, what the hell? Like, WeTransfer is literally one page with like 3 buttons. How could you possibly need to acquire an entire design studio? What is going on in there? So
what did go on?
Even to answer that question, the struggle was real with understanding UX in WeTransfer even before I started working there, because I didn't know what their challenges were. I couldn't understand how they would need so many designers on set to be developing such a simple product. But simplicity is the hardest thing ever to achieve.
It is.
I suppose that was kind of a challenge even before I started working there.
And that's also why it probably works so well, because it is so minimalistic.
Completely.
It is so easy. You upload, you share the link, you download.
And you'd be surprised how creative the development process and the work that the development engineering team do to make a product so simple. So it being simple for a user makes it actually very complicated in the behind the scenes aspect. So that's pretty cool to get to work with and learn from, because I would never have worked with an engineering team so closely before I started working at WeTransfer. So I have a much better understanding of how the thing works as well.
Who designs all these background animations on the WeTransfer page?
We actually have an in-house design studio. So the content that you see in the background of WeTransfer is a mix between advertising and creative work from people all around the world. So we have an editorial team which is dedicated to finding interesting stories from creative people all around the world, and they produce, editorial pieces. But also some of the images that you see in the background is advertising, which is also designed in-house to be more beautiful than stereotypical advertising.
But that's a different department from yours.
Yeah.
So you're purely focusing on UX, the product, the API.
Yeah, but it makes it also a cool place to work, because having that in-house is a good buzz to be around.
What would you tell your younger self if you think back at one of your first projects that you have done and you look at them now? What would you tell your younger self about it?
As in advice for myself, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, was there one project that you thought was really great, but was actually not? And now you have noticed it?
Oh God, always. Like, it's the story
Really?
of my life. It surely is the story of everyone's life. No one's actually
Yeah.
100%. Well, no, I speak for myself, but I'm always looking at old work and with utter horror at what that was. But I suppose, when I graduated from college, my kind of exhibition piece, if you want to call it, was a statement about how I think that all graphic design is BS, because that was, a younger me who was much too opinionated about trendy graphic design being like a load of nonsense, because what actually matters and the best part about any design process is the idea and getting to work with every single aspect of a thing to understand how it works, to then be able to design something relevant. So I think when I graduated from college, I had this, sassy little opinion about all trendy graphic design is BS. But I probably should have toned that down a little bit, because it prevented me from getting a job in a lot of trendy graphic design studios, which I also wanted. But I think also maybe it was the path that the world sent me on. I shouldn't be working in a trendy graphic design studio. So maybe I actually stick to the point.
It was destiny.
Exactly.
Yeah. And was there one project that really opened your eyes, or was it more the job once you got into WeTransfer that changed your vision of things and that brought you to where you are right now?
Well, yeah, certainly working on this API project has been pretty eye-opening, because it's extraordinarily technical, which I had no previous experience in, and I've learned a lot about, as I said, how the way it's made. But I think also when I worked at the Web Summit, before I started working at WeTransfer, I originally joined as a graphic designer, and I was kind of working on the identity and applying it to all of the stuff that it needed to be applied to throughout the conference. But then when I realized that there was much more to it, and that our lives as designers could be made a lot simpler by developing, a templatable system and distinguishing the signage at the event from the actual identity, and all of these kind of little intricacies that you don't realize until you're actually deep in the experience yourself. So I think working there and for so long made me realize that, it sounds corny, but design is everywhere and it matters, and the difference it could make to one person's experience of getting from A to B, it's a pretty enjoyable experience to feel like you're making something better or easier for someone.
Definitely, definitely. And where did you gather your technical skills from? Do you have any tips for our community, maybe? Books that you can recommend, websites, files that you can share through WeTransfer? No, just kidding.
Well, to be honest, I think the greatest piece of advice that I have for myself, that I'm constantly reminding myself, is just to keep asking. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. There is such a thing as feeling stupid asking a question, but there is no such thing as a stupid question. And in any experience that you have, or anybody that you work with, to just keep asking them what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it a certain way. And you learn so much about every aspect of the teams, even if they're not related to you. So in my sense, the engineering team, I had to literally ask them about every single thing. And even when they were talking about, lambdas, which I still don't even know what that means, but some really technical thing, I was like, what are you talking about? And they'd have to explain it to me, and then they start using technical language, and I'd be like, oh, I don't understand, and then they'd start using metaphors to explain it, and then I'd actually understand what it is that they're talking about. So I think, just keep pestering people with lots of questions so that you learn.
So you had no technical background whatsoever during your university time or something like that?
We had to build a website. Every year
everyone.
You kind of progressed ever so slightly in web development, but it was so basic. I know how kind of what it looks like. I could probably figure it out, but
it still helps you to continue the journey, right? I mean, at least you had a little bit of a base to
it's better than
build
nothing,
up on it.
for sure. Yeah. But your web development, well, no, this is harsh to say, but even the guy, I can't remember his name now, but the guy from Wix who just gave a really engaging talk about website development, like even that in and of itself has become a lot more accessible for anybody. So you don't necessarily have to have coding skills to be able to do it.
And also, like prototyping became a lot easier nowadays as well.
Exactly,
do you also use prototyping tools a lot?
If and when I need them, yeah. I don't really have a preference because I'm just so scatterbrained and like whatever is to hand to like get the idea out, then I'll use that. But yeah, we definitely use it for like user testing and stuff like that.
So you still do user testing a lot?
Yeah, well, I work with the UX team at WeTransfer to kind of, I would go to them with a hypothesis and be like, I think that people would react to this in this way. So they'd help me set up user interviews and testing and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so you usually start your process with user interviews and then you continue from there, or you do some research first?
The research is kind of continuous. I think particularly again with this project, like having a public API, you have to learn so much because we never had one before. So we released it in May. So all we can do with that now is learn how people are using it. So rather than setting up user interviews, let's say, I would just I've set up a survey on the developers portal. So anybody who signs up, I try and get as much information about them as I can, and like what they might be trying to do and what their intentions are, and can I have their email address so that I can ask them more and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of ongoing, but it's very useful for building appropriately, I suppose.
Awesome. You also have some stuff to show on your laptop?
Oh, well, I was just kind of going to show the developers portal, but it's self-explanatory. Well, I could show it, but...
Yeah, sure. I'm sure people are interested.
This is basically just our...
If not, let us know.
Yeah.
We can read it. Yeah.
This is basically just our developers portal that we released and have kind of made a few iterations on since then, which gives you access. You sign up, you can read our documentation about transfers and boards, which is kind of for anybody who has the mobile app. The WeTransfer mobile app. Boards is kind of a new format that we're trying out that lasts longer and can contain better content types, I suppose. But yeah, then we have SDKs that people are building. Some people in the developer community are already contributing SDKs because the whole thing is open source, which is pretty cool. It makes me excited when people
so everybody can use the code and share it and
exactly. And
play
then
around
if
with
someone
it.
makes something, they can share it openly. So then other people will realize, oh, I need that thing, and then it's not all kind
and
of
they build
waiting
up
around.
on it, right?
Exactly.
And then you can benefit from what others build up on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's pretty exciting, and it's good for everyone. But you're right. You do also need to kind of pay attention to what people ask for as well, or how people are using stuff.
Definitely. We have one more question in the chat from Maria. Did you use some special methodology in your team to work?
To work, I would assume that means as a special methodology to get stuff done, possibly.
Yeah. What about the steps? Is the follow-up question from her.
Oh God, it's still pretty kind of all over the place at the moment, but in a good sense. So we're a very small team. We were 6 people at the beginning when we started last January. Now we're down to 4 because there's lots of other stuff going on and WeTransfer. So we have no need for as big a team at the moment, though we would like everybody to come back. So the process is kind of unique in the sense that we all know what each other are doing. So we'll kind of scope a project or an idea. So, for example, at the end of last year, we did a kind of very broad analysis of what people were using the public API at WeTransfer for. And what we saw was that a whole load of people were signing up, but they weren't using their API keys. So they were getting to the step of signing up and showing enough engagement to get that far, but then they weren't doing anything. So then our latest hypothesis is that potentially the API is not very accessible, or maybe people don't have ideas for how to use it, or maybe people are just WeTransfer fans and they want to see what's going on in here. So then we kind of brainstorm ideas for how to make it more accessible, or how to provide more, better tools that don't involve such kind of labor-intensive code work. And then we'd spec out a project and we'd define the MVP of what that would be so that we can make it as quick as possible and get it out to test it to see, is this what you wanted? Is this why you're not using your API key? And then get that feedback and then kind of repeat that process.
Awesome. That's a great process. So we have come up to time. Thank you very much for joining us. We are live again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. with Claudio, so join us for that. Thanks, Amy. That was really interesting. You had your talk here already.
Yep.
So that's over. Was it recorded? Maybe for the community?
I actually don't know. Maybe.
So yeah, just check for Amy. Maybe her talk was recorded and you can replay it. But thank you very much for joining us and for answering the questions. And thanks to the community. Have a good day.